Hi, and welcome to the Dynamic Duel Podcast, a weekly show where we review superhero films and debate the superiority between Marvel and DC by comparing their characters in stat-based battle simulations. I'm Marvelous Joe.
And I'm his twin brother, Johnny DC.
And what is bound to be our least listened to episode, we are reviewing the original Swamp Thing movie that came out in 1982. It was directed by Wes Craven, and we are reviewing this now in lead up to the Swamp Thing television series that's going to debut on the DC Universe app that comes out later this month.
Yes, May 31st. But dude, people are going to listen to this episode. This film's like a cult classic.
It's also pure shit.
Oh my gosh.
We'll get into that later on this episode. Before that, we're going to be going over the comic book movie news from the past week, including the Watchmen official tease video that came out. They're calling it a tease, not a teaser.
No, it's a tease.
Which makes me feel weird. We got the announcement that Richard Madden has been cast as Ikaris in the Eternals movie that's going to come out next year. We also got word that Disney has bumped the new Mutants movie to 2020. I think the previous release date for that was in August of this year, but that's obviously not going to happen.
No, this is like the third time it's been bumped.
You could go ahead and look at our episode description if you want to skip to a specific topic that you want to listen to. It's all listed there, so go ahead and check that out.
Yeah, quick shout out to Kenneth McNeese Jr., who gave us a review on iTunes.
Yeah, old K-Mac came through and gave us a wonderful rating. And actually, a few other people did, because we're up to 103 ratings now on iTunes and Apple Podcasts. As you guys already know, you're well aware, you're sick of hearing about it. Our goal is to get to 200 ratings on that platform, at which point we will be eligible to become critics on Rotten Tomatoes, where we can have our reviews of the Marvel and DC movies count toward those films' official tomato meter. So if you guys know people that you want to introduce the show to, just see if they can go ahead and help us get to that goal, because we'd like to reach it before the end of this year.
Yeah, that's the plan. And with that out of the way, quick to the No Prize. A No Prize is an award that Marvel used to give out up until the 90s to fans. Our version, the Dynamic Duel No Prize, is a digital award that we post on social media that I personally draw for those who we feel gave the best answer to our question of the week.
Last week's question was, in addition to Ghost Rider and Hellstrom, what other Marvel character should get their own Hulu television series under the Spirits of Vengeance banner? That was off of the news that we talked about last week, where we heard that those characters were getting their own shows on Hulu, which was really exciting. And we got one answer for this question.
That's my fault again. It was such a busy weekend with like Mother's Day and everything that I forgot to post the question to social media.
Thank God it was a great answer. The winner of this week's No Prize goes to CJ Kraft, who said that Marvel should create a Hulu television series based off of Elsa Bloodstone or Werewolf by Night. And those are both great characters. Elsa Bloodstone is, Marvel's premier monster hunter, and Werewolf by Night, who's been part of a number of supernatural teams, both of them actually. And CJ also mentioned having those two shows means you could lead into a Legion of Monsters series, which was a comic book based on a team that had Elsa and Werewolf by Night and like Morbius and Ghost Rider and those guys. It was pretty cool.
Oh, it'd be like Defenders.
Right, exactly. And Elsa and Werewolf by Night actually had like a romantic relationship, I think, for a while. But yeah, it would totally be interesting. It would be like a supernatural Defenders type show. And CJ also mentioned like even tossing in Man-Thing on the team and releasing it in October around Halloween.
Nice.
That would be awesome. I'd love to see that.
What answer did you hope people would give?
Considering that these shows are being released under a banner called Spirits of Vengeance, we know Ghost Rider is the Spirit of Vengeance, but the character Moon Knight is the champion of Khonshu, who is the Egyptian god of vengeance in the comics. And I've always wanted to see a Moon Knight television show, and I think that would be perfect because he also has supernatural elements involved with him, with like Egyptian magic and even Werewolf by Night. He was introduced in that comic. I think you could definitely introduce Moon Knight here and have it fit into the same kind of dark supernatural world.
Yeah, that's the answer I was looking forward to as well. I do think that would be a great TV series. Something along the lines of like Arrow, but like good.
Arrow meets Legion, kind of,
Oh, yeah. That would be dope.
Yeah. But congrats again to CJ Kraft for your great answer. You win this week's No Prize. I think Jonathan's drawing Swamp Thing this go.
Yeah, it's going to be hard.
So go ahead and check that out. And if you, the listener, want to win your own No Prize, go ahead and stay tuned to later on this episode when we ask another question of the week. And now that that's done,
on to the news. Okay, so HBO released their official Watchmen Tease video last week, and they debuted it before this past episode of Game of Thrones. So friggin' everybody who saw this thing. It's definitely a tease. Like, after watching this, I still have no idea what the story is, except for maybe that heroes are returning in the Watchmen future, because the character of Don Johnson mentions that everyone thought all of these people were gone, but it turns out they were just hibernating. And I think he's referring to masked heroes, of which we see a shit ton, especially with this opening scene. It's just like a room full of Rorschachs.
It seems like perhaps Rorschach's journal was exposed and it kind of established a cult following of people who like idealized his point of view.
Yeah, it's almost like this reality's version of like the Guy Fawkes mask. It's like anonymous, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's a very apt comparison, especially considering that Alan Moore was the one that wrote V for Vendetta.
Right.
The policemen and women in this show are also wearing masks, which is weird.
Yeah, they wear like yellow like turtlenecks that they just roll up to hide their face like ninjas.
And is that based on the influence of costumed heroes in this universe, I wonder? Or why do they do that?
That is a great question.
So many just strange questions arise from watching this.
Yeah.
It's so vague.
Like, I don't have a good answer to anything. There's so many questions and so few answers. It definitely makes me want to watch the show.
There's nothing too fantastical about what we're seeing here at all. Like, there's no, like, Dr. Manhattan.
No.
There's no glowing blue guy that's naked floating around.
There's, like, this levitating, rotating construct going around the Washington Monument.
Oh,
but that's it. That's the only thing that was sort of fantastical that I noticed.
Do you think it looks to be within the spirit of the original comic series? Are you nervous about this? Because I kind of am, because it doesn't really look like anything I thought it would look like.
I guess I am nervous just because I don't recognize any of the characters or the elements, except for maybe like the ticking clock.
God, that was annoying. Man, if I ever hear the phrase TikTok again, it's going to be too soon.
TikTok.
Because that's all they said throughout this entire trailer. Even at the end, Don Johnson was like, oh, we're just talking about the end of the world. TikTok, TikTok, TikTok. It was annoying.
I guess. I mean, it's Watchmen. You know, there's a ticking clock motif.
Just admit it was annoying.
All right, I'll admit it. There's like this plane crash thing. I don't know if that's like a spaceship.
Maybe it's Archie, Night Owl's ship.
I didn't even think about that. That would be so cool. We don't really get a good look at it, though.
Who's the woman that's in this show that like dons a costume?
I don't know the character's name. It's played by Regina King. And I can't tell if she's like a vigilante or a cop or what.
It looks like she's going up against the Rorschach cult.
Yeah, maybe. The title card that pops up near the end is like straight from the comic and from the movie. Part of me kind of wishes that because this is a separate story, they would have gone with some kind of subtitle like Watchmen.
Who watches us?
I do. I will. I'm totally going to watch this show.
That's the best thing about this show is that I get to say, who watches The Watchmen? Nobody, because the show looks weird.
I just said I'm going to. I think a lot of people will watch it. I mean, it's HBO's next big property.
According to you.
Yeah, according to me. What other like franchise things do they have?
Dude, they have a shit ton of great shows.
Yeah, but they're not like established properties like Game of Thrones was with a fan base.
I don't know, they have Big Little Lies. I heard that's pretty dramatic.
Oh, I guess that is based off a book.
There you go.
But I'm talking about something that's going to appeal to the male demographic.
Oh, because you're sexist?
No, I'm just a male. Like, I'm not going to watch Big Little Lies. I'm going to watch this.
Why not?
Oh my gosh. Anyway, Watchmen. I love the characters. I love the story. I am kind of nervous about this, but I'm also eager to see what it is. This all brings us to our question of the week. If you could be any character from the original Watchmen comic series, who would you be and why?
And you can't say no one. So gun to your head, you have to be one of the original Watchmen characters. Let us know who it is.
Yeah, it's a different kind of question. It's like kind of like psychological.
We're trying to get an insight into how crazy all of you guys are.
Post your answer to our Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or email us at dynamicduelpodcast@gmail.com. We'll pick our favorite answer and draw that person a Dynamic Duel No Prize that we'll post to social media.
In other news, Richard Madden has been cast as Ikaris in the Eternals film that's going to come out next year, and I freaking love this news. I heard this, and I just golf clapped. I'm like, yes, brilliant casting.
This came like right after our question of the week about which Game of Thrones actor would you cast as a DC character.
Right.
So right when I saw this, I was like, no, you chose the wrong side.
Freaking Robb Stark. He's by far one of my most favorite characters in the whole series. I was I don't want to say anything about it. I know there are some people out there that haven't watched the show, but he is a great character as Robb Stark, and I've been looking forward to seeing him again in something else. And he was cast alongside Angelina Jolie, who's going to play Cersei, and Kumail Nanjiani, who I'm not sure who he's going to play.
We don't know.
Maybe like Mercury or somebody. I don't know. But Ikaris is one of the most powerful Eternals characters, and I think Richard Madden is a powerful-looking dude.
Is he?
Yeah, for the most part. He's like 5'10", right? He's pretty broad. He looked pretty heroic in Game of Thrones. I could buy him as like this Superman type level character. But the cast so far looks just so unique, so talented. I'm super compelled. I can't wait to see what they do with this movie. As I've said before, I'm still hoping that this movie explores like the prehistory and the ancient history of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yeah, and set up mutants and stuff like that, maybe.
Yeah, hopefully. Nothing much else to say than I am pumped.
I think you're the only one.
What?
Like, no one knows anything about the Eternals.
I mean, nobody really knew much about like Guardians of the Galaxy, or even like a character like Thor. Like comic book fans knew about Thor, but when you asked anybody else about the comic book character Thor, they were like, huh? And then, now he's a super popular A-list character. So people will get to know the Eternals. And if they don't, there's plenty of great comics out there that they can read on them.
That's true. I guess as long as it has the Marvel brand, people will go flocking.
Oh, definitely. Same can't be said for DC.
You could DC's these nuts.
That was pretty good. All right, moving on to the news that Disney has bumped the New Mutants film to 2020. The film was originally supposed to come out in April of 2018. It was filmed in 2017. So it's so weird to have a movie that's going to come out like 3 years after it was filmed.
Right, it's really weird. They still haven't done the reshoots yet.
Yeah, reports said they wanted to reshoot as much as half the film to make it scarier, because apparently it wasn't that scary, and the teaser trailer for the movie made it seem like a true horror film.
Yeah, I've also heard that they wanted to introduce the character of X-23 from the Logan film.
Oh, Daphne Keane, yeah. And there was also another rumor that said they wanted to introduce Nathaniel Essex, Mr. Sinister, since they teased him at the end of X-Men Apocalypse, too.
Ugh.
So it seems kind of like they're trying to cram like all the loose Easter egg ends into this last Fox X-Men film. And honestly, like I don't even really care.
Just let it die. Just let it die.
I will admit that I am interested in this film because I am just a fan of horror movies in general. And we haven't really seen a great mashup of the horror genre and the superhero genre yet. So it's compelling. But simultaneously, I'm also interested to be done of this version of the X-Men universe. Besides Deadpool, of course.
Yeah, but I'm kind of interested in this film's cast.
That's true. Like, ever since I've been watching Game of Thrones and seeing how badass Maisie Williams is as Arya, I really want to see her as Wolfsbane, as Rain. That's going to be amazing. And you have the guy from Stranger Things, Charlie Heaton, as Cannonball. That's great casting. Same thing with Anya Taylor-Joy as Magic. And the guy who plays Sunspot and the girl who plays Mirage. All great. So I do think that they can still do great things with this movie. I just hope that Marvel doesn't feel compelled to hold off on what they're planning on doing with the X-Men for like another 5 years after this movie comes out. I hope it's not delaying Marvel's other plans.
Well, based on what Kevin Feige has said about his plans for the former Fox properties, we are still like 5 years out.
Well, shit.
So maybe this will just tide us over until then.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I could use another Deadpool film, though, for sure. But I think that does it for all the news for this episode. Let's go ahead and get into our review of the 1982 Swamp Thing movie. Spoiler, it's horrible.
Okay, don't listen to Joseph. He wouldn't even give this film a chance. Like, he hated it right out the gate.
It's so old and boring.
Oh, jeez. Okay, so, yeah, the film did come out in 1982. It was directed by Wes Craven, which is pretty cool. It's sort of achieved like a cult classic status with some people due to its campy, low-budget charm. But honestly, if this film came out today, there's no way it would have gotten its own spin-off television show.
No, it would have gone straight to video, straight to the DVD bin. It wouldn't even been released on Blu-ray. It would have been released on DVD and went straight to the $2 bin.
Do you remember the TV show?
No.
I recently reviewed the TV show on the Blast from Our Past podcast. I think it was like last year. And in that episode, I said that the movie was better than the series, which I'm kind of regretting now. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't hate this movie. I think it starts great and gets progressively worse with each passing minute after the first act. The budget was basically non-existent. It was only made for $2.5 million. and it shows.
I don't think studios were willing to invest that much money in superheroes at the time. Although, do you consider Swamp Thing a superhero?
I've always considered it more of a supernatural thriller comic than like a superhero comic.
Uh-huh.
It was much more like British in a way, you know, a little bit more highbrow, less like American pulpy superhero. Tights and spandex, you know?
He does have powers and he does save the world, though.
Sort of. Not really. It was much more in the vein of like Sandman than Superman.
Oh, okay.
This movie is like a creature feature. There's not a lot of substance here. Like when I was trying to like evaluate like the themes and stuff like that, there really aren't any.
Yeah, dude turns into swamp creature and punches a bunch of idiots with guns and throws them really far into water.
That's the entire second act of the film, basically.
Yeah, they just keep coming back for more and more punishment. But the action is so horrible. He doesn't even use any of his swamp powers.
I would not consider this an action film by any means.
But there's so much action in it. Bad action.
It should have been a horror film, especially considering this is Wes Craven.
Right, the horror master. Nightmare on Elm Street, Scream, all that good stuff.
Wes Craven is known for making great films on a low budget. Mm-hmm. And I know a lot of people like this film, and I thought I did. Like, I used to own the DVD. But, like, after seeing it this time, and maybe it was just because I was sitting with you, and you were being an a-hole, and making, like, commentary throughout the whole movie, it's dropped a few notches in my mind. I mean, just watching it again, there's a lot that's, like, visibly wrong with this film. You know, everything from, like, the continuity, to the editing, to the cheap rubber suit.
Yeah, there were some moments where it looked like they used different cameras in between takes.
Yeah.
Because the whole film looks grainy, let's be honest, because it was made in 1982, where there are some parts where the film looks like it was shot in the 60s.
There was a lot of like handheld camera work done in the swamps in this film. And you're right, the quality between different shots is pretty noticeable. This may be like the worst cinematography in a superhero film ever.
Even the Superman movie eclipsed it, and that was made, the previous decade. And it's so weird because that movie was so good in terms of plot structure and acting and
special effects. Yeah.
Whereas this one had none of those things. Like the motivations of all these characters were non-existent. The story was just bad. I mean, the acting was just horrible.
Actually, one of the things that I think this film really has going for it is its cast.
What?
Yeah, like Ray Wise as Alec Holland.
He was a douchebag.
He doesn't have a big role in this film, but I do think he gives a lot with what he was given. He's a charming guy.
Charming or douchey?
Oh my gosh.
You know what I'm saying.
I don't think I do.
He was like a pompous, semi-arrogant jerk, but not like in the charming Tony Stark way, like in the actual dingus way.
I thought he was a total charming kind of jerk in the Tony Stark way. Robert Downey Jr. owes so much to Ray Wise as Alec Holland in this film. You have no idea.
I don't know.
He does have like a one creepy moment where he like flirts with the character of Alice Cable when you think he's married, but like it's all good when you realize it was just a misunderstanding. Of course, Ray Wise didn't play Swamp Thing. That was done by stuntman Dick Durock.
Which is a poor name if I've ever heard one in my life.
Dick Durock? Dude, that's a man's name.
Yeah, a man who stars in pornographic films.
Jeez. He's a stuntman. I guess they needed a stuntman to play Swamp Thing because the suit was like so heavy and uncomfortable in the swamp where they filmed that like it was a stunt just to play the character. He's definitely not as charming as Ray Wise. And I think like nowadays with CGI, the character who played Alec Holland would also probably play Swamp Thing.
Except in the television show that's coming out, it's two different actors.
You're right. Well, that's dumb.
Yeah, it's just a sign of a small budget.
Yeah, probably. It's sort of like Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno.
Right, exactly.
The Hulk.
And so much of this movie reminded me of the 70s Incredible Hulk television show.
Actually, Dick Durock played a character in the Hulk television show. He played like another Hulk-like creature that was like a villain.
Oh, okay. I think why this reminded me so much of the Hulk show was that Swamp Thing was essentially just the Hulk in this movie. He was strong and he could throw people really far, but he didn't really do anything that was planty besides like grow back a severed arm. But he didn't even really do that
and that's
fast.
the coolest thing ever.
Is it though?
That scene was really cool.
If by cool you mean like really fucking lame, then yeah.
You see like the fingers like just like start moving. It's like, oh snap.
It was so stupid
like
and cheap looking and so slow. But
he also has his healing powers in this film. So he's
that's
a little
right.
bit more than just the Hulk.
Okay, yeah, you're right. He did heal a couple of people by putting like moss on them, and then his hand would like glow green.
You almost wonder why he didn't just do that to like his missing arm.
That's true.
So one of the characters he healed was Alice Cable, who's played by Adrienne Barbeau.
With the worst 80s hair I've
my
ever
God.
seen in my entire life.
As much as I dislike 80s hair, I do think she's leading lady material, and I think she did a fine job here. The actress is actually married to John Carpenter.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she's something of like a cult classic icon, especially when it comes to horror films. She's been in movies like Escape from New York, The Thing, The Fog, Creepshow. She has some like pretty good like horror film cred.
Yeah, and she's attractive and everything. I just wanted her to put like some gel in her hair or something the entire time.
Just run a brush through it.
I can't stand 80s hair. I didn't really like her as the audience surrogate. I didn't find her character to be especially well written or relatable. I wish we would have spent more time with the character of Swamp Thing and Alec Holland as opposed to her.
What's interesting is that this is actually like a gender bent character from the comics.
Oh, really?
She's based on the character of Matt Cable, who was like a government agent. And I'm not sure why they did this other than to give Swamp Thing like a romantic interest and also, you know, a main character in the film.
And sex appeal.
That's pretty much what she's known for, the actress Adrienne Barbeau. In addition to being like a cult classic icon, she's also been like a sex icon. She had like this famous poster or something like that that everyone got.
And she got naked in this film, and I told you she did. And you're like, no, there's no boobs in this movie. And I'm like, dude, there are freaking boobs in this movie. How do you not know that?
And I don't know how I forgot that either, because one of the reasons this film achieved its cult-like status was because of its initial DVD release. There was additional footage of Cable swimming around with her breasts exposed that was shot for European audiences. And in America, the film was PG, but the racier international version was accidentally used in the film's DVD release. So parents bought the film for their kids and then later caught them watching it alone in their rooms. Yeah. So the DVD was the only way to watch that version in America. So it became like this valuable collector's item. And I used to own the DVD. Like I tried to find it, and it turns out my wife donated it to Goodwill. So I had to find the scene online.
You don't have to dig up the DVD, man. There are websites you can go to that have boobs.
Moving on to Louis Jordan as Anton Arcane. I'm probably pronouncing his name wrong. It's French. He was a Bond villain, right?
Yeah, he was in Octopussy, which came out a year after this movie came out.
He totally acts like a Bond villain here, just like waxing poetic and relating things to chess.
Oh yeah, he's very sophisticated. I thought he was great as Kamal Khan in Octopussy. And here he was just as debonair and smart and everything like that, but his dialogue was written horribly, I think. He had some weird scenes.
I think he had some of the best lines in the film.
He was a little bit more melodramatic than what the film called for.
Perhaps. He was definitely like a league above everyone else. He was the top billed actor in this film. I think it shows in his performance.
Definitely. It was like he was trying to elevate the material way beyond what the material was.
But I think he does elevate it.
Perhaps a little bit. I mean, I'll admit that this film would have been way worse if not for him.
I guess the last character I want to talk about is Jude. He was played by Reggie Batts. He's the young kid in the film.
I love that character.
Yeah, he was my favorite character in the film. He has some great lines, like, "Here comes trouble." He brought a lot of humor to the film.
He brought some much needed character into the film. He was fun to watch. I don't really think anybody else was fun to watch in this movie.
Oh, jeez. He kind of had like an uncanny knack for finding Cable, like in the middle of nowhere. Right?
That's true.
But it was nice to have a character who could assist Cable and like really knew his way around the swamps and what he was doing.
You know, my favorite line of his was when they were in the convenience store and Arcane's goons were about to break in, and the Cable asks him, "Do you have a gun in here?" And he was like, "What kind of place do you think this is?" "Of course we have a gun."
Just great timing on that line. Let's get into the story highlights. So the movie opens up with Cable arriving in the swamp while Arcane soldiers kill a scientist with a snake.
It's so weird because you really have no idea what the fuck is going on in these opening scenes. You don't know who Arcane's men are. You don't know what they're doing. You don't know who they're killing. You don't know who Cable is, why she's there, what's going on. It takes so long for you to figure out. It's really not intuitive. I tuned out less than 2 minutes into this movie.
Are you serious?
Yes.
I'm sorry the movie didn't hold your hand.
It's not about that.
What, did you want a narrator?
No, I didn't want to narrate. I just wanted some clarity as to what the heck was going on because the film did a piss poor job of explaining that.
I thought it was a great opening. It introduced the main character and set up these like deadly stakes of these evil henchman guy.
Yeah, but it also didn't explain why we cared about some of these minor plot points, such as the sensor going out.
We didn't learn about that until later.
Exactly. Like they set it up early, they don't address it, why we were supposed to care about it, and they spend so much time on it.
Yeah, because the story called for it. It all makes sense later. It all makes sense. Don't worry about it.
It all makes sense at a point where you really stopped caring.
Jeez. So we learned that Cable is going to be a part of a government research project in the swamp that's guarded from Anton Arcane, who wants to use the research for nefarious purposes. We learned that, like, pretty early on. Cable is introduced...
Yeah, we did. Not that early on.
You weren't paying attention. So Cable is introduced to Dr. Alec Holland, the head scientist on the project, and his sister, Dr. Linda Holland, who Cable initially thinks is Alec's wife. Which makes it a little creepy when Alec Holland takes Cable on a tour of the swamp and, like, hits on her.
Yeah, he was very forward. He was very much not part of the Me Too movement.
Just, like, think about it. Like, isn't it beautiful when a woman and a man do the most beautiful thing that they do? And she was like, whoa. When they get back to the lab, Linda shows them that the formula they're working on is explosive. And Alec explains that what they're trying to do is successfully combine plant and animal DNA so that plants can grow in deserts to help fight global famine, which is a cool, noble cause.
Yeah, it's a cool concept.
So they notice that droplets of the formula on the lab floor have sprouted plants, and they realize that the formula works. And in the excitement, Alec kisses Cable, showing that he has romantic feelings for her.
Yeah, he's not subtle.
And Cable goes out to let the project manager know of their success. But when she goes out, like, everyone, the entire security detail guarding the lab is dead. Arcane soldiers are responsible for everyone's death, and they use Cable to enter the lab and knock her out. They confront Alec, and Ritter reveals he was actually Arcane in disguise. What? Arcane holds Linda hostage over their research, and when she tries to escape, she's shot and killed.
I will say that I don't consider this part to be the beginning of the film or the opening. It's like the end of the first act, and it is by far the best part of the movie.
Yeah. Again, it starts off great, then it gets not great.
It starts off like shit, it gets great, and then it turns back into shit.
Alec grabs a beaker of their formula and tries to flee, but he trips and spills it on himself, engulfing him in flames.
This was awesome.
Which was insane.
This was amazing.
Like, those were some big-ass flames.
Yeah, that was a great stunt.
Like, whoever that stuntman was for that, like, they probably died in the hospital that night. So as Alec runs into the swamp on fire, somehow Cable escapes with the latest research notebook, which honestly, I have no idea how she got that.
I just attributed it to the shitty editing that takes place throughout this entire film.
Probably. So the second act of the film is essentially one long overdrawn chase scene, where Cable is caught and rescued by Swamp Thing over and over again.
It's really hard to sit through.
Swamp Thing remains, like, fairly well hidden initially. We only get glimpses of him. But by the time we see his face, it's pretty disappointing.
It's so bad.
I'm not going to lie. Like, it's pretty bad. It could have been a lot better. It was a lot better in the TV show and actually the sequel to this, Return of Swamp Thing.
And Swamp Thing does look pretty cool in the upcoming DC Universe television show.
So we meet Jude in the second act, who runs a gas station where Cable learns she can't rely on her government contacts. She and Jude make their way back to the lab to get the research notebook, which she hid before she was captured that first time.
Yeah, and she stumbles upon Swamp Thing, who is somewhat remembering his past life by attempting to do some science, but instead he just gets angry and starts smashing things.
When Cable leaves Jude with the notebook to go back and help Swamp Thing, I was kind of like, why? Like, she didn't know it was Alec yet.
Right, she spends so much of this second act running and tripping. She trips so much in this movie. She can't run more than 10 meters without tripping.
It's kind of true. There's a lot of tripping in this film, even done by Alec when he, like, first doused himself with the chemicals. When Jude is attacked and maybe killed by Arcane's men, that's when Swamp Thing uses his healing power for the first time to heal Jude's face.
Yeah, it was nice because Jude was a great character, and if he didn't get healed just the way he was killed, would have made this movie exceptionally dark. He was just a kid, and, like, the whole side of his face was bleeding.
Yeah, it was pretty sad. When Cable is rescued by Swamp Thing later, he gets his arm chopped off with a machete. She faints and then wakes up in his arms, and that's when she learns that Swamp Thing is Alec. And not too long after, she goes skinny dipping, and Swamp Thing watches like a perv.
That was weird. And immediately after, he decides to throw away his notebook for no damn reason.
No reason. I think he just did it out of, like, sexual frustration, you know?
Yeah, probably.
Right after that, Arcane captures Swamp Thing, Cable, and the notebook. Then he imprisons them in his mansion. He tests the formula on his henchman Bruno, who becomes, like, a pig weasel dwarf guy.
Yeah, that was so bizarre.
Arcane is like, what the fuck? And he learns from Swamp Thing that the formula brings out a person's innate character.
But how does Swamp Thing know that?
He's been thinking about it for a long time.
Oh my God.
He's thinking about it.
No.
He said it had nothing to do but just like sit in the swamp and think about it.
Oh, my inner nature is the swamp. No, that's so stupid.
It's essentially the super soldier formula from Captain America. Just brings out like your innate character. What a ripoff.
Except that in this story, it makes no damn sense. If it brought out your inner nature, why did he become Swamp Thing? Alec Holland was a dick. He should not have become like this altruistic hero swamp character.
He was an altruistic scientist. Trying to feed the world, trying to feed the hunger. That was his inner nature, giving people vegetables. He became a vegetable.
Oh my God.
So Arcane thinks of himself as like a godlike genius. So, he just assumes that that's what he'll become when he drinks the formula. Nope. He drinks it and grossly, disturbingly transforms into an evil sword-wielding boar monster.
He turned into Man-Bear Pig. He's half man, half bear, half pig.
He did. That transformation scene, though, it was
hard to watch.
That was really freaking hard to watch.
It was definitely a precursor to like the gross like self-mutilation scenes from the Nightmare on Elm Street series with Freddy Krueger. Because like it was pretty gory.
Like you do not want to eat while watching that scene.
Right.
Which I made the mistake of doing. I was like eating like a cheese pizza. I was like, oh, I can't. No more. It's just interesting that that's like what he really was on the inside. He was just like this evil monster. So Monster Arcane goes to kill Swamp Thing, but Bruno helps them escape into the swamp. So out in the swamp, Swamp Thing and Monster Arcane fight in like slow motion.
Right, because the actors cannot move in their costumes in the swamp.
Yeah.
It's so bad.
And their like fists are like 3 feet away when they're punching and connecting, seemingly connecting.
It's so horrible.
It is really bad fight choreography. And it all leads up to the worst scene in the film, when Swamp Thing runs from Arcane's sword and then hides behind Cable.
Yeah, he uses her as a human shield.
He gets her stabbed in the heart. Like, what did you think was going to happen?
And then he's like, oh no. And he gets angry, and then he starts beating the Man-Bear Pig with like this stump from the swamp. But it's like, dude, be mad at yourself. You got her stabbed.
That was your fault. Exactly. That was on you. Worst hero ever. Eventually, he kills Arcane with his own sword, and then brings Cable back to life using his healing powers. Once she's revived, Cable like begs Swamp Thing to return with her to Washington so that they can remake the formula. But now that Swamp Thing knows what his formula can do to people, he declines and goes back into the swamp. And that's when Jude appears out of nowhere, and they leave together. The film ends.
Thank God.
Honestly, by that time, I kind of had the same reaction. In a way, this film makes me even more excited for the Swamp Thing TV show that's going to be on DC Universe, because it's bound to be the most successful, faithful adaptation of the character that we've ever seen on screen.
Yeah, it looks more supernatural, like it's going to have more of those horror elements to it.
Yeah, for sure. I really hope it's good. It's definitely going to be better than this film. I really want them to do the character justice because, to me, Swamp Thing is almost like an A-lister in DC Comics. He's probably at the same level.
Your criteria for A-listers is pretty broad.
What? It's Swamp Thing. I mean, he has his own movie. He has his own movie sequel. He's going to have 2 TV shows now. If you have those things, you're pretty much an A-lister.
That's a good point.
I really want the character done justice. This film did not do that, and I regrettably have to give this film a score of 1.5 stars.
Yeah, it almost felt like Swamp Thing, like in name only. It really did not feel like the character to me in terms of how he moved and what he did. And the story just wasn't there. It was mostly non-existent, especially for that second act. So much so that by the end of this film, it felt like a chore to watch. And so I gave it 1.5 stars too. Maybe that one scene where Alec Holland became Swamp Thing was good, but other than that,
not too many redeeming qualities.
Yeah, I'll probably never watch it again.
Well, you'll probably watch the sequel once we review that at some point during the course of this podcast.
Oh, no.
That does it for this episode. In our next episode, we will be pitting Swamp Thing versus Man Thing in a duel.
Yeah, I was initially thinking about putting Swamp Thing against Groot, but I do think that Man Thing is more powerful than Groot, and Swamp Thing is pretty powerful in his own right. So it's going to be definitely an interesting match. I don't know how either of them are going to hurt each other, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes.
So definitely tune in next week. In the meantime, go ahead and let us know what you guys thought about the Swamp Thing movie by reaching out to us on social media at Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, and you can find links to all of those sites on our website, dynamicduel.com.
And definitely reach out to us, because I'm sure there's a lot of people who have fond memories of this film, and we need to stick it to Joseph.
If there are people who have fond memories of this film, I would recommend not watching this film again, because it does not hold up.
It definitely has not aged well. If you visit our website, you'll find a link to our merchandise store, which is on TeePublic. If you click that link, you'll get a discount on your first order. So if you like superhero swag like t-shirts and mugs and pillows and things like that, definitely check our store and website out.
Yeah, support the podcast, which you can also do by sharing the podcast. If you enjoy the show, share it with all your friends and encourage them to rate us on iTunes and Apple Podcasts so we can meet that Rotten Tomatoes goal. But yeah, I think that does it for everything in this episode this week. So we'll go ahead and sign off here. So without further ado,
Up and away.
true believers.